What if I told you that some of history's greatest secrets aren't hidden in plain sight, but concealed behind layers of legend and guarded by creatures born from our deepest fears and wildest imaginations? Picture entire cities, once bustling centers of trade, culture, and power, vanishing without a trace, leaving behind nothing but stories whispered through generations. These are the forgotten cities guarded by myth, places where reality and fantasy intertwine so completely that even today we struggle to separate truth from tale. From the heart of the Amazon rainforest to the frozen peaks of the Himalayas, these lost settlements have captivated explorers, scholars, and dreamers for centuries, not just because of what they might contain, but because of what they represent: humanity's unyielding desire to believe there's more to this world than meets the eye. Think about the stories you grew up with: tales of dragons hoarding treasure, spirits protecting sacred grounds, or entire civilizations swallowed by the sea. These aren't just bedtime stories, they're cultural memories encoded with warnings, wisdom, and whispers of real events that shaped our past. The myth-guarded cities we're about to explore are more than just archaeological mysteries. They're windows into how ancient civilizations made sense of their world, using symbolism and storytelling to preserve their legacy long after their physical presence faded. These legends served as both map and deterrent, guiding the worthy while warning away those who sought to exploit or desecrate what was held sacred. And in doing so, they created a rich tapestry of narrative that continues to inspire wonder and curiosity to this day. In this video, we're embarking on a journey across continents and through time to uncover the secrets of these enigmatic places. We'll delve into the jungles of South America in search of cities shielded by ancient beasts, cross deserts where Djinn are said to punish the greedy, and dive into waters where sunken kingdoms lie protected by mythical guardians. Along the way, we'll meet the explorers who risked everything to find these places, the cultures that kept their memories alive, and the modern technology that's finally bringing some of these legends into the light of reality. This isn't just a tour of lost cities, it's an exploration of why we're so drawn to the unknown and what these enduring myths reveal about our own place in the world. So settle in and open your mind to the possibilities, because the truth behind these legends is often stranger and more fascinating than fiction itself. But why did our ancestors feel the need to guard their most important places with stories of monsters and spirits in the first place? To understand that, we need to step into their worldview, where the line between the natural and the supernatural was beautifully blurred. For ancient civilizations, the world was a place of immense power and profound mystery. Unexplained events: a sudden earthquake, a devastating flood, a landslide that buried a village, demanded an explanation. Without modern science, these societies turned to narrative, weaving tales that gave meaning to the chaos. A rumbling in the mountains wasn't just seismic activity, it was the breath of a slumbering dragon. A city that vanished under desert sands wasn't merely abandoned, it was punished by angry gods for its arrogance. These myths were the original science and psychology, helping people make sense of their environment and their place within it. Beyond explanation, these stories served a powerful practical purpose: protection. Imagine you are the ruler of a wealthy, isolated city-state. Your greatest assets are your culture, your trade routes, and perhaps a sacred religious site. How do you keep invaders, looters, or the simply curious from plundering what you've built? You could post more guards, but your resources are limited. A far more powerful and enduring solution is to post a story. By spreading a legend that your city is watched over by an invincible serpent, or that the path to your gates is patrolled by vengeful spirits, you create a psychological barrier far stronger than any wall. This wasn't mere superstition, it was a brilliant form of early security and cultural preservation. The myth acted as a filter, discouraging those driven by greed while potentially allowing in those who approached with respect or the right ritual knowledge. These guardian creatures were never just simple monsters. They were deeply symbolic, embodying the core values, fears, and identity of the culture that created them. A dragon often represented greed and the dangers of hoarding wealth, making it the perfect guardian for a city of gold. A water spirit might symbolize the life-giving yet destructive power of the sea, guarding a coastal trading port. In the Himalayas, the snow lion, a creature of impeccable purity and fearlessness, guards the mythical city of Shambhala, perfectly reflecting Buddhist ideals of enlightenment. The guardian is a mirror. It shows us what the culture that invented it cherished most and what it feared most. To understand the myth, we must first understand the people who told it, deciphering the values encoded within the fangs, scales, and wings of their legendary protectors. This process of myth-making is also how societies preserve their history when written records fade or are destroyed. Oral traditions become living libraries, and the most important information, the location of an ancestral homeland, the reason for a great migration, the lessons from a past disaster, gets wrapped in a memorable story featuring a fantastic creature. The Guardian ensures the story is told and retold, generation after generation. The city itself might crumble to dust, but the tale of the beast that guards its ruins lives on, keeping the memory of that place alive long after its physical remains are lost. The myth becomes a time capsule, and the legendary creature is its loyal, eternal keeper. This is why, even today, the hunt for these lost cities so often begins not with a map but with a story. We are following the echoes of ancient narratives, hoping they will lead us not only to forgotten stones, but to a forgotten understanding of the world. Our journey into the heart of these myth-guarded cities begins not in a dusty desert or a frozen mountain pass, but in the overwhelming, living expanse of the Amazon rainforest. This is a place where the air itself feels ancient, thick with moisture and the chorus of unseen life, a green labyrinth that has challenged humanity for centuries. It is here that one of the most compelling modern legends was born, the quest for a place the indigenous people called simply Z. The story of this lost city is inextricably linked to the enigmatic figure of Colonel Percy Fawcett, a British explorer whose name has become synonymous with mystery. In the early 1900s, Fawcett became obsessed with the idea of a grand, sophisticated civilization hidden deep within the jungle, a notion that flew in the face of conventional wisdom at the time, which viewed the Amazon as a pristine wilderness incapable of supporting large-scale urban life. Fawcett's conviction wasn't born from mere fantasy. He had spent years mapping the continent, and during his travels, he had heard persistent rumors from rubber tappers and encountered fragments of pottery and other artifacts that hinted at a complex, forgotten past. He also studied a mysterious document known as Manuscript 512, housed in Brazil's National Library in Rio de Janeiro, which described a fabulously wealthy city of stone discovered by Portuguese explorers in the 1700s. Blending these clues with his own intuitions, Fawcett pieced together a theory of a singular, magnificent metropolis, which he code-named Z. His quest was not for mere riches, but for a discovery that would rewrite history, a proof of an advanced pre-Columbian society that would stun the world. But the Amazon has its own guardians, and they are not merely physical. Fawcett and his team quickly learned that the jungle's greatest defenses were woven into the very stories of its people. He recorded tales of the Mapinguari, a terrifying creature from indigenous folklore. This beast was described as towering and foul-smelling, covered in matted red hair, with a gaping mouth in the center of its stomach and a deafening roar. To the local tribes, the Mapinguari was a very real guardian spirit of the forest, a tangible manifestation of nature's power and wrath, designed to punish those who took from the jungle without respect or gratitude. These stories served as a potent deterrent, a psychological barrier warning outsiders that some knowledge was not meant to be uncovered by the unworthy. In 1925, Fawcett, accompanied by his eldest son Jack and his son's friend Rolly Rimmel, embarked on what he declared would be his final expedition. They vanished into the green curtain of the Xingu region, sending a few messages back before all communication ceased forever. Their disappearance became one of the greatest exploration mysteries of the 20th century, fueling countless rescue missions and theories, from death by disease or animal attack to capture by a hostile tribe. Fawcett's fate, swallowed by the very jungle he sought to conquer, only added layers of tragic romance to the legend of Z, transforming him from an explorer into a mythic figure himself, a cautionary tale about the price of obsession. For decades, the scientific community largely dismissed Fawcett's dream as just that, a dream. The prevailing view held that the Amazon's poor soil could never have supported the intensive agriculture needed for a large urban center. That is, until technology finally began to catch up with the legend. The advent of satellite imagery and a remote sensing technology called LiDAR, which can digitally peel back the forest canopy, has radically changed our understanding. Researchers have now identified the remnants of vast, sophisticated networks of roads, moats, plazas, and settlements across the Amazon basin. These weren't the isolated, small villages once imagined, but interconnected complexes that supported thousands of people, complete with complex earthworks and sophisticated soil management techniques that allowed them to thrive. What Fawcett imagined as a single shining city of Z was likely a reality far more fascinating, a sprawling, decentralized civilization of garden cities, now known to archaeologists as the Kasarab culture or others like it. The mythical Mapinguari, in turn, finds its roots in very real and now extinct megafauna like the giant ground sloth, whose fossils have been found in the region. The legends told to Fawcett were not pure fiction. They were a cultural memory, a story encoding very real dangers of the jungle and the memory of a time when great beings, both animal and human, shaped the land. The lost city was not a fantasy, but a forgotten truth, and its guardian was not a monster, but the enduring spirit of the Amazon itself, protecting its secrets until the world was finally ready to see them not as a treasure to be looted, but as a history to be understood. Leaving the humid embrace of the Amazon, our search for myth-guarded cities now pulls us into the soaring peaks of the Andes, where a different kind of legend took root, one forged not in shadowy green, but in the blinding glare of gold. This is the origin of El Dorado, a name that has become synonymous with a futile, obsessive quest. But the true story is far more fascinating than a simple hunt for treasure. It is a powerful lesson in how a single, beautiful ritual can be warped by greed and fear into a monstrous legend of a city protected by a golden serpent. The spark for this entire epic was not a city at all, but a man. Among the Muisca people, in what is now Colombia, a profound spiritual ceremony marked the ascension of a new leader. The future ruler would journey to the sacred lake Guatavita. There, upon a raft piled high with offerings of gold and emeralds, he was covered from head to toe in gold dust, transforming him into a living, breathing sun god, the El Dorado, or the Golden One. As the raft reached the center of the lake, the silence would be broken by the music of pipes and the chanting of priests. The new leader would then dive into the dark, cold waters, washing the gold from his body as an offering to the gods, while his attendants hurled the priceless treasures into the depths. This was not an act of hoarding wealth, but of redistributing it to the divine, a sacred contract to ensure the prosperity and balance of his people. When the first Spanish conquistadors heard fragmented accounts of this ritual, their imaginations, already feverish with dreams of wealth, performed a dangerous alchemy. They took a story about a man who gave away gold and transformed it into a promise of a place that held infinite gold. The Golden One became the Golden City, a place they called El Dorado, imagined as a metropolis where gold was as common as stone and temples were paved with jewels. And such a place, in their minds, could not be left unguarded. The myth quickly grew a set of scales and fangs. Indigenous stories, perhaps told to deter these aggressive foreigners, described a massive serpent or dragon that coiled around the city or slept upon its hoard, a supernatural sentinel that would unleash doom upon any greedy enough to trespass. This guardian was a perfect symbol, a fusion of European dragon lore and the powerful serpent deities already revered in South American cosmologies, like the rainbow serpent. It represented the ultimate paradox of their quest. The very wealth they sought was protected by a force that promised death. For the next 2 centuries, this myth drove countless expeditions to their ruin. Men like Gonzalo Pizarro and Sir Walter Raleigh led hundreds, even thousands, of soldiers and slaves on nightmarish journeys through swamps, up treacherous rivers, and into unforgiving jungles. They drained lakes, fought hostile tribes, and succumbed to disease and starvation, all while chasing a shimmering mirage. The real guardian of El Dorado was not a serpent, but the continent itself, its vastness, its diseases, and the clever stories of its people, all of which conspired to protect the truth from those who sought only to plunder. The tragic irony is that while the Spaniards were searching for a fantasy, they were walking right past the reality. The Muisca Confederation was indeed one of the most sophisticated and wealthy cultures in the Americas, renowned for its masterful goldwork. Proof of the ritual that started it all was unearthed in a most extraordinary way. In 1969, near the town of Pasca, 2 farmers found a small golden raft in a cave. This exquisite artifact, now known as the Muisca raft, depicts the El Dorado ceremony in stunning detail, with the central chief figure surrounded by priests and oarsmen. It is a silent, beautiful confirmation that the heart of the legend was true all along, just not in the way the conquistadors imagined. The golden serpent, then, is one of history's most potent metaphors. It was the embodiment of the conquistadors' own consuming greed, a warning that unchecked ambition is a self-destructive force. Their quest for El Dorado bankrupted empires, cost countless lives, and ultimately revealed far more about the darkness in the human heart than it did about the secrets of the New World. The City of Gold was never a place to be found, but a state of spiritual equilibrium to be achieved, a lesson the invaders were tragically unequipped to learn. The myth endured because it speaks a universal truth. Some treasures are not meant to be owned, only revered, and the guardians we face are often the reflections of our own intentions. From the sweltering jungles and golden dreams of South America, our quest now ascends to the very roof of the world, to a realm of pristine snow and pure spirit. High in the majestic solitude of the Himalayas, a different kind of legend whispers on the thin, cold air, a story not of material wealth but of spiritual perfection. This is the myth of Shambhala, a hidden kingdom of peace and wisdom, said to be veiled from the unworthy not by traps or terrors, but by its own sublime nature and the noble creatures chosen to protect it, the mythical snow lions. In Tibetan Buddhist texts, particularly within the ancient Kalachakra Tantra, Shambhala is described as a pure land, a circular kingdom hidden behind a ring of towering, ice-clad mountains. It is not a city of gold, but a society of enlightened beings who live in harmony, free from suffering, old age, and strife. The journey to Shambhala is not measured in miles, but in spiritual merit. The legends say that only those with a pure heart and a calm mind can find the path. Those driven by greed, aggression, or selfish desire will wander forever in the wilderness, blind to the paradise that may be just beyond the next pass. This makes Shambhala's protection fundamentally different from the monstrous guardians of other legends. Its primary barrier is not a beast to be slain, but a state of being to be achieved. This is where the snow lions or Senge enter the mythos. They are not fearsome monsters but majestic, celestial beings, often depicted as white with flowing turquoise manes, representing the element of air and the pristine purity of the high mountains. In Tibetan iconography, they are a symbol of fearlessness, joy, and unwavering discipline. The thunderous roar of the snow lion is said to carry the profound teachings of the Buddha, awakening beings from the slumber of ignorance. As the guardians of Shambhala, they do not attack with tooth and claw. Instead, they embody the very qualities one must cultivate to be worthy of entry. Their presence signifies that the path to enlightenment requires the fearless courage to confront one's own inner demons and the joyful discipline to walk the path of virtue. They are less like sentries at a gate and more like living benchmarks of spiritual attainment. This profound myth has captivated seekers for over a millennium. Tibetan lamas and Mongolian kings have pored over the ancient texts, creating intricate maps and detailed guides that are more allegorical than geographical, describing spiritual waypoints rather than physical landmarks. In the West, the Theosophical Society of the 19th century adopted Shambhala as a bastion of ancient wisdom, and even the Nazi regime, in a grotesque distortion of the legend, sent expeditions to Tibet searching for the origin of what they believed to be the Aryan race. In modern times, some have tried to link the legend to real, breathtakingly beautiful places like the Hunza Valley in Pakistan or certain remote regions of Tibet, suggesting that the myth could be a cultural memory of an isolated, utopian society. Yet, these attempts to pin Shambhala to a map ultimately miss the point of the legend entirely. The true power and enduring appeal of Shambhala lies in its function as a metaphor. The snow lions guarding its borders represent the internal obstacles we all must overcome: our own fear, anger, and desire. The hidden kingdom is not a physical location to be conquered, but a state of mind, a potential for perfect peace and understanding that exists within each person, waiting to be discovered once the inner turmoil is quieted. It is a collective ideal, a vision of what humanity could achieve if it were guided by wisdom and compassion instead of conflict and craving. This is why the myth remains so vibrant. It is an eternal, aspirational compass pointing toward our highest potential. The journey to find the mythical kingdom, therefore, is always an inward journey first. Yet the legend of Aram did not simply fade into the sands of time. It demanded a resolution, a tangible connection to our world. This is where modern science enters the narrative, not to debunk the myth, but to engage in a fascinating dialogue with it. For centuries, scholars and explorers speculated on a possible location for this lost city. The key clue lay in its description as a hub for the frankincense trade, a priceless commodity in the ancient world that traveled on routes crossing the southern Arabian Peninsula. This focus led researchers to the arid desolation of the empty quarter, the Rub al-Khali. The search took a dramatic turn in the early 1990s when a team utilizing then cutting-edge satellite radar imagery identified what appeared to be ancient caravan routes converging on a single point in modern-day Oman. Following these celestial maps, archaeologists were led to a site known to the local Bedouin as Yuba. Excavations there revealed something astonishing: the ruins of a fortified city built around a large, octagonal fortress, with towers that had quite literally collapsed into a massive sinkhole beneath them. It was a dramatic and sudden end, perfectly mirroring the catastrophic destruction described in the Quran. While there is ongoing debate about whether this site is the literal Aram of legend, the alignment is profoundly compelling. The discovery of Yuba demonstrates a powerful truth that these ancient stories often contain a kernel of geographical and historical fact, a memory of a real place that met a real disaster. The myth of Iram, guarded by the warning of the Djinn, had effectively preserved the memory of a significant trading center for over a millennium, guiding archaeologists to its doorstep long after its physical form had been claimed by the desert. The Djinn, in their way, had finally allowed the worthy to listen and learn. Our journey now carries us from the sun-scorched deserts to the tempestuous shores of Brittany in northwestern France, where the Atlantic Ocean whispers a tragic tale of a kingdom lost beneath the waves. Here, the legend of Wise or Cur is in the Breton language, endures as one of Europe's most haunting maritime myths, a story where the guardian is not a distant monster but a fallen princess whose actions unleashed the very doom she sought to escape, and where the sea itself became the eternal warden. Wise was said to be the most magnificent city in all of Brittany, a jewel of commerce and culture built astonishingly below sea level. Its survival depended entirely on a magnificent feat of engineering, a massive dike equipped with a single, imposing bronze gate that held back the relentless ocean. The key to this gate was entrusted to the city's ruler, the pious King Gradlon, who wore it on a chain around his neck. This key was more than just a piece of metal. It was the literal lifeline for an entire civilization, a symbol of responsibility and the fragile barrier between order and chaos. The city thrived behind this wall, but its prosperity bred a legendary decadence, a moral decay that centered on the king's own daughter, the beautiful and reckless Princess Dahat. The legends describe Dahat as a complex and tragic figure, a woman enthralled by pleasure and pagan influences. In some versions of the tale, she is seduced by a mysterious, charming knight dressed in red, who is later revealed to be a demonic entity. He plays upon her desires and insecurities, convincing her that the greatest thrill would be to unlock the city gates at the height of a ferocious storm, to hear the awesome power of the ocean roar just beyond the walls. Blinded by passion and a thirst for sensation, Dahat waits for her father to fall asleep, steals the key from around his neck, and turns it in the great lock. The moment the gate swings open, the pent-up fury of the Atlantic crashes through, a wall of water that consumes the city in mere moments. The shrieks of the revelers are silenced as Wise is swallowed whole by the hungry sea. King Gradlon is awakened by the calamity and flees on his magical horse Morvark, with his daughter clinging behind him. But as they gallop across the flooding land, a divine voice rings out, declaring that Gradlon can only be saved if he casts the demon behind him into the waves. With a heart breaking with grief and duty, the king pushes his own daughter into the churning water. In that instant, the floodwaters recede from his path, and he finds safety on dry land. The fate of Dahat, however, is where the guardian myth truly takes shape. Some say she simply drowned, but the more enduring folklore claims she was transformed, her spirit merging with the sea to become a malevolent guardian. She is remembered as a Morgan, a siren-like sea spirit who sings haunting melodies to lure sailors to their deaths on the rocks, eternally protecting the sunken ruins of her former home from any who would dare to disturb them. To this day, fishermen in the Bay of Douarnenez, the area most associated with the lost city, speak of hearing the mournful tolling of church bells rising from beneath the waves on a quiet day, a ghostly reminder of the drowned city's fate. The legend served as a powerful cautionary tale for coastal communities, a vivid narrative explaining the very real and terrifying threat of storm surges and coastal erosion. It personified the dangers of moral failure and the catastrophic consequences of disobeying natural and divine laws. The sea monster guarding Wise is not an external beast but the embodiment of nature's retribution, triggered by human folly. Intriguingly, modern marine archaeology has lent a fascinating layer of plausibility to this ancient story. Studies of the Bay of Douarnenez have revealed evidence of a submerged forest and Neolithic sites that were indeed flooded by rising sea levels around 4,000 years ago. While no Bronze Age city has been found, These discoveries confirm that the coastline was once significantly different and that great tracts of land were lost to the ocean in catastrophic events. The myth of Wise, like so many others, appears to be a cultural vessel, carrying the memory of a real geological trauma across countless generations, using the powerful figures of a flawed princess and a drowned city to ensure the lesson would never be forgotten. Deep within the impenetrable jungles of eastern Honduras, in a region known as the Mosquitia, lies a legend that has taunted explorers for centuries. It speaks of a place called Ciudad Blanca, the White City, a mythical metropolis of gleaming stone temples and unimaginable wealth, abandoned to the vines and shadows. But unlike other lost cities sought for gold, the White City is protected by something far more enigmatic than a dragon or a serpent. Its warden is a primal spirit of the jungle itself, a trickster god in the form of a monkey, whose curse falls upon those who enter with greed in their hearts. This tale is a profound collision of indigenous wisdom, colonial ambition, and cutting-edge science, revealing how a myth can act as a perfect, timeless guardian. The stories told by the local Petch and Mosquito peoples are not invitations for treasure hunters but are coded warnings, passed down through generations. They describe a magnificent city, its structures carved from a radiant white stone, now silent and empty. But it is not truly abandoned. Its secrets are kept by powerful, unseen forces, most notably a great monkey god or spirit. To disrespect this place, to take even a single artifact without permission, is to invite a terrible and inescapable curse. Misfortune, illness, and even death would follow the intruder back from the green darkness, a supernatural retribution for violating a sacred trust. For the indigenous communities, these stories were a vital form of cultural preservation. They weren't merely superstitions, they were a sophisticated ethical system and a defensive strategy, using the power of narrative to shield a vulnerable heritage from the plunder that had devastated so many other ancient sites across the Americas. This myth captured the imagination of the outside world in the 1930s, when an American adventurer named Theodore Maud claimed he had finally found the lost city. He returned from the jungle with fantastical stories and a few artifacts, but he also spoke in hushed tones of the immense, terrifying monkey idol he had encountered deep within a tunnel, a deity he called the dwarf or spirit monkey. He believed this was the source of the curse. Tragically, Maud took his own life in 1954 before he could reveal the location, his death only fueling the legend and cementing the monkey god's fearsome reputation as a guardian who reached beyond the grave. For decades, the White City slipped back into the realm of pure myth, its location and very existence debated by scholars who dismissed it as another romanticized El Dorado. Then the 21st century brought a tool that could see through the myth's LiDAR, or light detection and ranging technology. In 2012, a documentary team and a group of scientists led by filmmaker Steve Elkins and anthropologists Christopher Fisher and Oscar Neil Cruz launched an aerial survey over the Mosquitia. By firing millions of laser pulses through the dense forest canopy, they created a detailed digital map of the ground below. What they saw on their screens was nothing short of revolutionary. The LiDAR images revealed not just a single city, but an entire lost civilization. There, hidden under a green veil that had not been lifted for perhaps 600 years, was evidence of vast plazas, earthworks, irrigation canals, and pyramids, a complex urban landscape that could have supported tens of thousands of people. The myth of a lone white city had given way to the reality of a forgotten kingdom. Guided by these digital maps, a ground expedition finally pushed its way to the core of the largest site, now called the City of the Jaguar. They found a breathtaking valley untouched by time, with over 52 artifacts lying partially exposed on the ground, including magnificent stone vessels and a metatare with a vulture's head carving. Most significantly, they discovered a cache of objects ceremonially placed at the base of a pyramid, believed to be an offering to leave the city in peace. Among these treasures was a haunting, half-buried stone figure that has become the symbol of the entire discovery, the word Jaguar shaman, a man in a transformational state, part human and part spirit. This figure, while not a monkey, embodies the same shamanistic power and connection to the animal world that the monkey god represents. It was a tangible link to the spiritual beliefs that gave birth to the guardian myth. The discovery of these real, physical ruins does not debunk the legend of the monkey god. Instead, it elevates it. The modern explorers, unlike the conquistadors of old, understood they were entering a sacred space. They worked with indigenous guides and made the conscious decision to leave the artifacts undisturbed, documenting them with 3D scanners instead of removing them. They recognized that the true curse was not a supernatural hex, but the very real cultural destruction and loss of context that comes from looting. The monkey god, in this light, becomes a powerful metaphor for the unintended consequences of exploration. The diseases introduced, the sites damaged, the stories erased. It is the jungle's immune response, a narrative antibody against exploitation. The story of the White City and its simian guardian offers a new blueprint for how we engage with the past. It shows that myth and science are not enemies but can be powerful allies. The ancient stories, born from a deep understanding of place and spirit, preserved the memory of the city and protected it long enough for a technology to emerge that could reveal its truths without desecrating its soul. The monkey god did its job perfectly. It didn't keep people out, it filtered them. It kept away those who would only see treasure and welcomed those who were finally ready to see a history worthy of reverence, reminding us that some secrets are not meant to be owned, only understood. These legendary guardians are far more than just colorful characters in a campfire story. They are sophisticated narrative tools, engineered by cultures to perform a vital function. They act as the living, breathing security system for a civilization's most precious assets, not just its gold or artifacts, but its history, its identity, and its deepest values. Think of a myth as a kind of cultural DNA, a complex code that contains instructions for survival, and the guardian creature is the protein that protects that code, ensuring it gets passed down through the generations intact. When a city falls or a people are dispersed, the physical evidence can be looted, burned, or simply worn away by time. But a story about a dragon that coils around the ruins, or a spirit that curses those who trespass, is almost indestructible. It travels lightly, needing only a voice and a listening ear to survive wars, famines, and migrations. This is how a place can remain alive in the collective imagination long after its last stone has crumbled to dust. The practical applications of these stories are brilliantly straightforward. For an ancient society, posting a physical guard at a remote temple or a sacred burial ground is a drain on resources. But posting a story about a guardian that can see into men's souls, that can shapeshift into a terrifying beast, or that brings down a plague on thieves and their families. That is a permanent, self-sustaining deterrent. It's a psychological barrier that is far more effective and cost-efficient than any wall. The legend of the monkey god in Honduras, for instance, wasn't just a spooky tale. It was a highly effective conservation strategy. For centuries, it kept looters and opportunists at bay, preserving the archaeological site of the White City until researchers arrived with the right technology, and more importantly, the right respect to document it without desecration. The myth did the heavy lifting of preservation, allowing the physical truth to survive long enough to be discovered on its own terms. Beyond simple protection, these guardian myths are powerful vehicles for moral and ethical instruction. They are not arbitrary. The specific nature of the creature almost always reflects the values or fears of the culture that created it. A city of gold isn't guarded by a cute, fluffy bunny. It's guarded by a dragon, the ultimate symbol of greed and hoarding. The lesson is clear. The pursuit of wealth for its own sake will bring you into conflict with a monstrous version of your own desire. In the Himalayas, the snow lion guarding Shambhala represents fearlessness, purity, and joyful discipline, the very qualities one must cultivate to be worthy of entering an enlightened society. The guardian, therefore, becomes a mirror. It shows an individual or a society what they must overcome within themselves to earn the reward. The external monster is a reflection of the internal obstacle, making the myth a guide for personal and collective development. This is why these stories possess such a remarkable ability to shapeshift and adapt across centuries. The core narrative remains, but the details of the guardian can evolve to address new fears and new contexts. The Djinn of Arabian deserts, for example, were once spirits of the empty places, punishing those who showed arrogance. In modern retellings, they might represent the dangers of colonialism or the exploitation of natural resources. The sea monster off the coast of Brittany began as a divine punishment for a princess's sin, but for today's coastal communities, it can symbolize the very real and escalating threat of climate change and rising sea levels. The myth stays relevant because its guardian is not a fixed entity but a fluid symbol, capable of absorbing contemporary anxieties and retransmitting ancient wisdom in a form that each new generation can understand. This adaptability is the key to its immortality. Ultimately, these stories of myth-guarded cities offer us a profound insight into the human psyche. They reveal our deep-seated need to make sense of loss, disaster, and the unknown. A city doesn't just vanish, it is punished for its hubris or hidden to protect its purity. An unexplained noise in the jungle isn't just the wind, it is the breath of the Mapinguari. By populating the blank spaces on our maps with these creatures, we transform terrifying uncertainty into a narrative we can grapple with. The guardian gives a face and a reason to the chaos, making it somehow more manageable. It allows a culture to package a historical event, a geographical feature, and a moral lesson into a single, unforgettable story. To understand these legends is to understand how humanity has always used the power of storytelling not just to explain the world, but to protect what matters most within it. No other lost city has captured the global imagination quite like Atlantis, a legend that has floated in the collective consciousness for over 2,000 years, always just out of reach. The entire story originates from the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who, around 360 B.C., used the tale not as a historical report, but as a powerful allegory. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, he describes a formidable naval power that existed 9,000 years before his own time, an island paradise larger than Asia and Libya combined, located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. This was a utopian society of immense wealth, advanced technology, and unparalleled political wisdom, a beacon of human achievement. But according to Plato, its people grew arrogant and morally corrupt, their divine favor withdrawn. In a single terrible day and night of cataclysmic earthquakes and floods, the entire island was swallowed by the sea, vanishing forever into the depths. For Plato, Atlantis was the ultimate cautionary tale, a fictional device to illustrate his philosophical points about the ideal state and the consequences of hubris. Yet, the human mind is not always satisfied with allegory. Over the centuries, the idea of a real, physical Atlantis took root and grew into an obsession. The quest to find it has spawned countless theories, each placing the lost continent in a different corner of the globe. Some researchers, taking Plato's geographical clues literally, have searched the Mediterranean, pointing to the Minoan civilization on Santorini, which was indeed devastated by a colossal volcanic eruption around 1600 B. See, others have looked to the Caribbean, suggesting the Bahamas or even Cuba, while some have proposed locations as far-flung as Antarctica or Indonesia. This relentless search highlights a deep human desire to turn myth into map, to prove that a story so compelling must have a basis in fact. It's a testament to the power of narrative that a philosophical parable could evolve into history's greatest treasure hunt. Central to this evolving mythos is the concept of the guardian. If Atlantis was so perfect and so powerful, what ensures it remains lost? Plato's original text doesn't mention sea monsters, but the legend naturally grew this protective layer. The ocean itself became the primary warden, its immense, unexplored depths forming an impenetrable barrier. But storytellers and seekers soon populated those depths with specific sentinels. In various retellings, Atlantis is said to be protected by the Tritons of Greek myth, half-man, half-fish creatures who blow on their conch shells to summon storms and shipwrecks. Others speak of the kraken, a leviathan of the deep capable of dragging entire vessels down to a watery grave. In more modern, pseudo-scientific interpretations, the guardians are recast as the advanced descendants of the Atlanteans themselves, a race of aquatic beings or a society wielding crystal-powered technology that creates mysterious energy fields, defying exploration and keeping their sunken world secret. These guardians, whether biological or technological, serve the same profound symbolic purpose. They represent the idea that a true utopia is not merely hidden, but inherently inaccessible to those who are not yet spiritually or ethically prepared to discover it. The barriers are not just physical, they are moral and evolutionary. The legends suggest that humanity, in its current state of conflict and greed, is simply unworthy of accessing the knowledge and peace that Atlantis represents. The guardians are the gatekeepers of this divine judgment, ensuring the city's secrets remain safe until we have evolved beyond the very flaws that caused its downfall. In this way, the myth becomes a mirror, reflecting our own failings back at us and challenging us to become better. This enduring fascination has been fueled by tantalizing, though inconclusive, archaeological discoveries. Modern sonar and underwater exploration have revealed fascinating anomalies that ignite the imagination. Off the coast of the Azores Islands, which align with Plato's description of a location beyond the Strait of Gibraltar, sonar maps have shown what appears to be a large, submerged pyramidal structure. Near Bimini in the Bahamas, a long, linear formation of limestone blocks known as the Bimini Road has been hotly debated for decades, with some claiming it is a man-made road or wall, though most geologists attribute it to natural beach rock formation. These discoveries, while scientifically debated, are electric for Atlantean believers. They provide just enough visual evidence to keep the hope alive, a blurred photograph that suggests we might be one expedition away from rewriting human history. Ultimately, the true power of Atlantis and its mythical guardians lies not in their potential reality, but in their enduring function as a symbol. They represent the ultimate mystery, the final frontier on our own planet, the deep ocean which we have still explored less than outer space. The guardians symbolize all the forces that keep knowledge hidden: time, nature, and our own limitations. They challenge us to question what truths might lie buried not just beneath the waves, but beneath the layers of our own history and consciousness. Atlantis is the ultimate what if, a story that pushes us to explore, to question, and to dream of a better version of ourselves and our society. Its greatest treasure is not the gold imagined in its palaces, but the endless curiosity it has sparked for millennia, proving that a story's value is not in its truth, but in its power to inspire. Now let's journey into the heart of the medieval European imagination, to a time when maps were filled with wonders and the world felt vast and mysterious. Here, a powerful legend took root, one that would shape the course of exploration and diplomacy for centuries. The story of Prester John and his magnificent kingdom, a Christian paradise said to be defended not by armies, but by the most majestic of mythical beasts, the griffin. This tale is a fascinating window into how the hopes, fears, and geopolitical desires of an era can conjure an entire world into being, complete with its own supernatural protectors. The story first surfaced in the mid-12th century in a letter, supposedly written by Prester John himself, that circulated among the courts of Europe. It described a realm of almost unimaginable splendor located somewhere in the vast, unknown lands of the East. This was no ordinary kingdom. It was a land overflowing with milk and honey, where peace and justice reigned supreme under its ruler, a priest-king who was both a direct descendant of the biblical Magi and a powerful Christian monarch. In an era defined by the Crusades and a desperate struggle against Islamic powers, the idea of a mighty Christian ally waiting in the wings, ready to flank their common enemy, was electrifying. Prester John's kingdom became a symbol of hope, a divine counterbalance that promised to turn the tide of holy war. But such a perfect and wealthy paradise could not be left undefended. Its primary guardians, according to the legend, were the griffins. These magnificent creatures, with the powerful body of a lion and the keen-eyed head and wings of an eagle, were the perfect symbolic sentinels. The lion was the traditional symbol of earthly power and kingship, while the eagle represented spiritual vision and a connection to the divine. Combined in the griffin, they created a being that embodied the very essence of Prester John's realm, a fusion of temporal authority and pious vigilance. The legend said these griffins hoarded gold and precious stones, not out of greed, but as natural custodians of the kingdom's wealth, and they would fiercely repel any invaders who approached with hostile intent. They were the ultimate guarantors of the kingdom's blessed isolation, ensuring that only the worthy could enter this sanctified space. This captivating myth did not remain a mere story. It became a driving force for exploration. When famed travelers like Marco Polo ventured eastward, they carried the tale of Prester John with them, using it as a lens to interpret the unfamiliar cultures they encountered. Polo's accounts are a fascinating blend of observation and legend. He reported hearing of a Christian king in Central Asia, and even speculated that Prester John might have been a powerful Mongol ruler defeated by Genghis Khan. As European knowledge of the world expanded, the location of this elusive kingdom kept shifting. When no Christian powerhouse was found in Asia, the search moved to Africa, where the long-standing Christian kingdom of Ethiopia seemed to fit the description perfectly. Embassies were sent, and for a time, European monarchs genuinely believed they were corresponding with the descendant of the great priest-king, seeking a strategic alliance. The myth, in effect, guided real-world diplomacy and expanded the geographical horizons of Europe, all in pursuit of a phantom. The enduring power of the griffin in this story lies in its deep resonance with medieval ideals. This creature was more than a simple monster. It was a heraldic symbol of divinity, power, and guardianship. By placing griffins at the gates of Prester John's kingdom, the storytellers were making a profound statement about the nature of this hidden realm. It was not a place that could be conquered by force alone. It could only be approached by those who themselves embodied the griffin's dual nature, those with the strength of a lion and the visionary faith of an eagle. The guardian, therefore, was a test of character for any would-be seeker. The myth ultimately reveals less about a real place and more about the medieval Christian worldview, a deep yearning for a utopian ally, a belief in a divinely ordered universe, and the use of powerful symbolism to articulate both hope and a warning about the mysterious, unexplored world beyond their maps. As the quest for Prester John's kingdom faded into the maps of history, a new and equally potent legend began to blaze across the deserts of the New World, one fueled by a different kind of holy grail, the lust for gold. This is the story of the 7 cities of Cibola, a dazzling mirage of wealth that drew conquistadors deep into the heart of North America, only to find their ambitions shattered not by armies, but by a mythic guardian born from the very sky itself, the Thunderbird. This powerful tale is far more than a simple wild goose chase. It is a profound lesson in how a story can be wielded as a shield, a form of brilliant narrative resistance against an unstoppable force. The spark for this epic quest was struck by a handful of survivors from the disastrous Navi's expedition, which had shipwrecked off the coast of Florida in 1528. After 8 years of unimaginable hardship walking across the continent, a few emaciated men, including Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, finally stumbled into a Spanish outpost in Mexico. Their accounts of the northern interior were vague, but they mentioned hearing whispers from indigenous peoples about great cities in the north, cities whose walls supposedly shimmered with wealth. Whether this was a misunderstanding, a deliberate exaggeration by the Spaniards to justify their own survival, or a calculated story told by the natives themselves is lost to time. But the Spanish viceroy, Antonio de Mendoza, heard one word above all others, Cibola, and to his ears it could only mean one thing, another El Dorado waiting to be claimed. Eager to claim this prize, Mendoza dispatched a Franciscan friar, Marcos de Niza, on a scouting mission. Upon his return, Fray Marcos delivered a report that would seal the fate of hundreds. He claimed to have seen from a distant mountainside one of the 7 cities. It was, he said, larger than the city of Mexico, and so rich that even its common utensils were made of wrought silver and gold. This was the final, irresistible bait. In 1540, a massive expedition was assembled under the command of the ambitious young conquistador Francisco Vázquez de Coronado. It was a small army, over 300 Spaniards, 1,000 indigenous Mexican allies, herds of livestock, and a driving belief that unimaginable wealth was just over the horizon. They were marching not just into unknown territory, but directly into a story. What they encountered, however, were not the golden turrets of their dreams, but the formidable realities of the arid Southwest and the sophisticated Pueblo cultures who lived there. The first city they reached was the Zuni Pueblo of Jaguar. To the sun-dazzled eyes of the gold-hungry Spaniards, it must have been a crushing disappointment. It was a complex, multi-storied adobe structure that shone brilliantly in the sun, which may have been the source of the Golden City description, but it was undeniably made of earth and straw, not precious metal. A battle ensued, and the Spanish, with their steel and horses, easily captured the pueblo, but they found no gold. Undeterred, Coronado spent the next 2 years fanning his men out across the vast plains and canyons, from the Grand Canyon to the grasslands of Kansas, chasing ever fainter rumors, each one leading to another pueblo community powerful, ancient, and rich in culture, but not in the gold the Spaniards so desperately craved. This is where the Guardian enters the story. The peoples of these regions, including the Zuni, Hopi, and many others, held a profound reverence for a mighty spiritual being, the Thunderbird. This was no mere animal, but a colossal, supernatural force. It was said that the flapping of its immense wings created the thunder and the wind, and the flash of its eyes was the lightning that cracked across the sky. It was a being of immense power and authority, a protector of the natural order and a punisher of those who transgressed against it. For communities living in an arid landscape where rain was life itself, the Thunderbird was the ultimate master of the most vital resource. It is not difficult to imagine that tales of such a powerful entity guarding the approaches to their sacred lands would be shared with these strange, aggressive men who were so single-mindedly obsessed with material treasure. The story of the Thunderbird was a perfect deterrent, a narrative that spoke directly to the conquistadors' own worldview of divine punishment and supernatural power. In this light, the legend of Ciudad takes on a completely new dimension. It becomes a stunning example of strategic storytelling, a form of intellectual and spiritual jiu-jitsu used by indigenous peoples against a technologically superior invader. Unable to defeat the Spanish with force of arms, they may have used the one weapon they had in abundance, their understanding of the invader's psychology. By directing Coronado's army on a futile quest ever deeper into a harsh and unforgiving landscape, they effectively used a myth to neutralize a threat. The real guardian of the cities wasn't a physical beast, but the very idea of one, a story that exploited Spanish greed to lead them on an exhausting, costly, and ultimately fruitless journey that ended in bankruptcy and broken dreams for the conquistadors. While Coronado returned to Mexico in disgrace, his expedition was a catastrophic failure only if measured in gold. In every other sense, it was a revelation. It opened up the American Southwest to European knowledge, documenting the existence of complex societies and breathtaking geography that had been entirely unknown to them. The myth of Ciudad, guarded by the Thunderbird, had inadvertently redirected the course of history, forcing a collision of worlds that would have profound consequences for centuries to come. The Thunderbird, a symbol of the natural world's ultimate authority, had done its job. It protected the true treasures of the region, not gold, but the living cultures, the ancient pueblos, and the spiritual connection to the land by revealing the emptiness of the conqueror's desires and the enduring power of a well-told story. Leaving behind the golden mirages of Ciudad, our journey now takes us to a landscape defined not by what is present, but by what is profoundly absent: water. We venture into the vast, sun-baked expanse of the Kalahari Desert, a place where life hangs in a delicate balance, entirely dependent on the rare and precious gift of rain. Here, amidst the red sands and shimmering heat haze, exists one of southern Africa's most enduring legends, the story of a lost city of immense splendor, hidden not by time or jungle, but by the dunes themselves, and protected by the most logical and potent of guardians, a spirit that commands the very essence of life in this harsh realm. The myth, passed down through generations by the San people, one of the world's oldest cultures, speaks of a place the early European explorers would come to call the lost city of the Kalahari. It was not a city of gold, but a metropolis of stone with great walls and towers that once rose from the desert, a testament to a powerful and sophisticated civilization that had somehow thrived in this unforgiving environment. But the city did not simply fall into ruin, it was reclaimed. The stories tell of how the dunes, like a slow, patient tide, swept over the city, swallowing it whole and sealing its secrets beneath the sand. Yet, the legend insists the city is not abandoned. It is watched over, protected by a powerful and vigilant guardian known as the water snake or a water spirit, a being of immense power that controls all the scarce water in the region. This guardian is a master of illusion and punishment. The tales describe how it can conjure magnificent lakes and flowing rivers to tempt greedy explorers deeper into the desert, only to make the visions vanish, leaving the interlopers to perish of thirst under the relentless sun. Those who approach the lost city with disrespect, who seek to loot its treasures rather than understand its history, are met with misfortune. Their water skins mysteriously drain, their guides become lost, and a terrible drought follows them back to their own homes. For the San, this myth is not merely a spooky campfire story. It is a critical piece of their ecological and ethical worldview. The water spirit is the personification of the desert's ultimate authority. In a place where a single waterhole can mean the difference between life and death for an entire community, the guardian embodies the fundamental rule of the Kalahari. Water is not a commodity to be owned, but a sacred trust to be respected and shared. The legend captured the Western imagination in the late 19th century, largely due to the accounts of a Canadian explorer and trader named Guillermo Farini. After an expedition into the desert in 1885, Farini returned with sensational claims. He published a book and even gave lectures, complete with photographs, asserting that he had discovered the extensive stone ruins of a great ancient city, half buried by the sand. He described arches, pavements, and a massive stone wall, all covered in mysterious inscriptions. His reports ignited a firestorm of interest and skepticism, launching a series of expeditions throughout the 20th century, all aiming to find Farini's lost city. While some teams found intriguing geological formations that could be mistaken for ruins, and others discovered ancient sand rock art depicting their spiritual beliefs, no definitive evidence of a large stone city was ever confirmed. Farini's account is now widely considered to be either a deliberate hoax or a case of mistaken identity, where the wind-sculpted rocks of the desert played a trick on the eyes. Yet, the fascinating twist is that this does not make the myth untrue. More recent archaeological work has revealed that the Kalahari is not the empty wilderness it was once assumed to be. Researchers have found evidence of ancient trade routes, remnants of small stone settlements, and sophisticated water capture systems that date back centuries. The Tiswana people, for instance, built large towns in the region, like the famous ruins at Dithakong. So while there may not have been a single, monolithic stone city, the Kalahari did indeed host complex societies that rose, flourished, and eventually faded, often due to shifts in climate and access to water. The legend of the lost city appears to be a cultural memory of this past, a story that preserves the knowledge that great things once existed here, but they were vulnerable to the desert's whims. The true genius of the myth lies in its enduring relevance. The water spirit guardian is a perfect narrative encapsulation of sustainable living. It teaches that exploitation of a fragile environment inevitably leads to collapse. The city wasn't destroyed by an invading army. It was swallowed by the desert it failed to respect. This ancient story carries a warning that feels incredibly modern, speaking directly to our current global concerns about water scarcity and climate change. The guardian of the Kalahari is not just protecting a ruined city. It is protecting a principle, the idea that survival in a harsh world depends on understanding limits, practicing reverence, and recognizing that some resources are too vital to be treated as mere treasures to be plundered. It is a lesson in ecological humility, encoded in a story about a snake and a city of sand, proving that the oldest myths often hold the newest wisdom. Now we sail across the vast Pacific to a place where the line between the human-made and the supernatural feels as thin as the horizon. Imagine a city not on land, but perched upon a coral reef, a labyrinth of over 90 artificial islets interconnected by a network of tidal canals, all constructed from colossal basalt logs. This is Nan Madol, rising from the shallow waters off the eastern shore of Pohnpei Island in Micronesia. To call it a ruin is to misunderstand its presence. It is a spectral metropolis, a Venice built by giants, humming with a silence that feels profoundly alive. The local name for it says it all, Sound Nan Leng, the reef of heaven. But this heaven is fiercely guarded, not by walls but by stories. Stories of sea spirits and ancestral voices that whisper warnings on the ocean breeze. The scale of Nan Madol is the first mystery. How did the Saudeleur dynasty, over 1,000 years ago, move these megalithic stones, some weighing 50 tons, without the use of pulleys, metal tools, or draft animals? The engineering feat is staggering, suggesting a highly organized society with sophisticated knowledge of architecture and hydrology. This was a ceremonial and political center of immense power, with special islets for priests, for food preparation, and most notably, for the mortuary rites of the elite. The central compound, Nandowas, is a fortress-like tomb, its walls soaring 25 feet high. designed to keep the living out and the powerful spirits of the departed rulers in. This architectural intention is the key to understanding the guardian myths that cling to the stones like sea mist. The Sordelors were not just building a city, they were constructing a sacred barrier between the world of the living and the world of the dead. This is where the guardians make their presence known. For the people of Pohnpei, Nan Madol is not an abandoned relic. It is a place that remains actively charged with spiritual energy. The legends speak of Ani, or sea spirits, and the restless ancestors of the Sordelors who fiercely protect the sanctity of their home. Visitors and researchers alike have reported uncanny phenomena. The low, resonant sound of a conch shell horn blowing from an empty islet, the feeling of being watched from the water, and an overwhelming sense of dread that compels people to leave. More tangible are the stories of curses. Those who take even a small rock as a souvenir are said to be followed by a streak of bad luck, failed crops, illness, family misfortune, that only ends when the stone is returned. These narratives are not casual ghost stories. They are a deeply ingrained part of the cultural fabric, a system of belief that commands respect. The practical effect of these guardian myths has been profound. For centuries, they have acted as a perfect, self-sustaining preservation system. While other ancient sites have been plundered for their stone or looted for artifacts, Nan Madol has remained largely intact, its treasures protected not by security guards but by deeply held taboo. The stories deter casual vandalism and discourage disrespectful intrusion, ensuring that only those who approach with the right intention, be they local custodians conducting rituals or researchers working in close collaboration with the community, will venture into its watery channels. The myths have, in a very real sense, done what park rangers and warning signs attempt to do. They have preserved the site's physical and spiritual integrity through the power of collective belief. Modern archaeology has not dispelled this awe, it has deepened it. Scientists studying the site have confirmed the incredible effort behind its construction and have begun to unravel the complex social structure that made it possible. Yet the data and the stories are not in conflict. Instead, they exist in a fascinating dialogue. The scientific marvel of the architecture justifies the cultural reverence, and the cultural reverence, encoded in the guardian myths, has protected the scientific evidence from destruction. Nan Madol stands as a powerful testament to the idea that the most effective way to preserve history is not just to document it, but to instill it with a sense of the sacred, to wrap it in a story so powerful that it becomes part of the landscape itself, as enduring as the basalt logs that defy the crashing waves. Now we turn to a legend woven into the very fabric of British lore, a tale that emerges from the sea mists and crashing waves off the rugged coast of Cornwall. This is the story of Lionus, a lost land of mythic grandeur, said to have been a fertile and prosperous kingdom that now lies sleeping beneath the cold waters of the Atlantic. In the grand tapestry of Arthurian legend, Lionus holds a special place as the home of tragic heroes, most famously Sir Tristan of the Round Table, whose own story of love and loss seems to echo the fate of his sunken homeland. But the land was not undefended. Its legends speak of towering giants, mystical beings who served as its ancient protectors, and whose very footsteps were said to have triggered the cataclysm that sent the kingdom to its watery grave. The image of Lionus is one of heartbreaking beauty and sudden disaster. Medieval texts describe it as a low-lying plain of exceptional fertility, dotted with thriving villages, lush forests, and no less than 140 prosperous churches, all connected to the Cornish mainland by a narrow causeway. It was a land of plenty, a Celtic paradise. The catastrophe was as swift as it was total. According to the most common version of the legend, a massive storm surge, combined with a terrifyingly high tide, overwhelmed the sea defenses in a single night. The waters rushed in with unstoppable force, swallowing every field, every forest, every home. The few survivors were said to have escaped on horseback, galloping for their lives toward the higher ground of Cornwall as the waves devoured the land just behind them. Only one man, a righteous figure named Trevelyan, made it to safety, and his family's coat of arms forever after bore a horse emerging from the sea, a permanent emblem of this narrow escape. Guardianship of this precious land fell to figures of immense scale and power, the giants of Cornish folklore. These were not the mindless, destructive beasts of some traditions, but more complex beings, often portrayed as the primordial inhabitants and defenders of the land. In the stories, their role is deeply paradoxical. Their immense size and strength, which made them formidable protectors, also made them unwitting agents of the kingdom's destruction. Some tales suggest that the giants, in a moment of rage or during a great battle, stamped their feet with such colossal force that they shattered the fragile land's foundations, causing it to fracture and sink beneath the waves. This poignant detail transforms the guardian into a tragic figure, a symbol of power so immense that it becomes its own undoing, a force of nature that cannot be fully controlled, even by itself. This powerful narrative finds a startling echo in modern geological science. The coastline of Cornwall and the nearby Isles of Scilly has been dramatically shaped by rising sea levels since the end of the last ice age, over 10,000 years ago. What is now a scattered archipelago was once, during periods of lower sea level, a single, much larger landmass connected to the mainland. Core samples and underwater surveys have revealed submerged forest peat, ancient river valleys, and even human-worked flints on the seafloor, providing tangible evidence that people once lived and hunted on land that is now covered by the sea. The legend of Lionus is not a pure fantasy. It is a cultural memory, a story that preserves the very real experience of coastal communities watching their world gradually, and sometimes catastrophically, be reclaimed by the ocean. The Great Flood was not a single event, but a process witnessed over generations, compressed into one dramatic night of loss by the power of oral storytelling. The giants, therefore, become a brilliant narrative device for processing this trauma. They personify the uncontrollable, awesome power of the natural forces at work. The seismic shifts, the relentless erosion, the storm surges that seemed like the footfalls of an angry god. By attributing the disaster to the giants, the storytellers were not just describing an event, they were explaining it. It gave a face and a reason to a seemingly random and terrifying act of nature. Furthermore, the giants serve as a bridge to a deeper, more ancient past. They represent the old ways, the old world that existed before the flood, their immense stature symbolizing the magnitude of what was lost. They are the guardians of memory itself, ensuring that the story of the drowned land and the people who called it home would never be forgotten, even as the physical evidence vanished beneath the waves. Lionus teaches us that sometimes the most powerful guardians are not those who prevent loss, but those who ensure that the meaning of what was lost endures forever. Our journey now takes us to the very end of the known world, to a land of howling winds and breathtaking desolation, Patagonia. Here, at the southern tip of South America, European explorers and conquistadors, their minds still feverish with dreams of El Dorado, began to hear whispers of another legendary sanctuary, a place even more elusive and wondrous. They called it the City of the Caesars, or sometimes the Wandering City. This was not just a city of gold, but a place rumored to offer something even more precious, eternal life and refuge from all earthly sufferings. But such a paradise, isolated in one of the most hostile environments on Earth, could not be without its protectors. The legends spoke of towering, formidable giants who roamed the arid plains and frozen peaks, acting as the eternal guardians of this mystical haven. The descriptions of this city were a tapestry of European hopes and indigenous mystery. It was said to be built from silver and gold, its streets paved with precious gems. Some accounts claimed it was inhabited by the survivors of a Spanish shipwreck, who had built a new and perfect society. Others said it was populated by ghosts or by ancient apostles who had discovered the secret of immortality. The most captivating detail, however, was its ephemeral nature. The city of the Caesars was never in the same place twice. It was said to appear suddenly to lost and starving travelers, offering salvation, only to vanish back into the mist just as suddenly, leaving them wondering if it had ever been there at all. This wandering nature made it the ultimate unattainable prize, a mirage that taunted the greedy and rewarded only the pure of heart, if it rewarded anyone at all. Standing between seekers and this shimmering mirage were the guardians, the Patagonian giants. The very name Patagonia is thought to derive from the Spanish word Patagon, meaning big foot, a name given by Ferdinand Magellan's crew after their first encounters with the native Tehuelche people in the 16th century. European accounts from explorers like Antonio Pigafetta described these individuals as giants of monstrous stature, so tall that a European man would barely reach their waist. They were painted as primordial beings of immense strength, their footprints left deeply impressed in the soft earth, their voices booming like thunder across the empty landscape. In the minds of the Europeans, these colossal figures were the perfect, fearsome sentinels for a city of impossible wealth, a physical barrier as vast and imposing as the landscape itself. The reality, of course, was a fascinating collision of perception and culture. The Tehuelche people were, and are, notably tall, with some historical accounts and modern anthropologists noting that many men often reached over 6 feet in height, a stature that would have seemed genuinely giant to the generally shorter European sailors of the era. Furthermore, they were masters of their environment. They dressed in guanaco skins, which could make them appear even larger and more imposing, especially when seen from a distance or in the distorting haze of the Patagonian heat. Their survival skills in that brutal landscape would have seemed almost supernatural to outsiders. The giants were not mythical constructs but real people, whose physical presence and profound adaptation to a harsh world were interpreted through a lens of fear, wonder, and pre-existing European folklore about exotic races living at the edges of the map. This myth of the giants served multiple purposes. For the European explorers, it was a way to process the sheer otherworldliness of the Patagonian landscape, a place of terrifying storms, vast emptiness, and strange fauna. Projecting their anxieties onto the indigenous people as giants transformed a complex human reality into a simpler, more fantastical narrative that fit their worldview. For the Tehuelche themselves, it is possible that stories of their own size and power were encouraged as a form of defense, a way to deter potentially hostile invaders by presenting themselves as formidable and fearsome. The legend acted as a protective shield, using the fears of the outsiders to keep them at bay. The relentless search for the city of the Caesars, guarded by its giants, had a profound impact on the history of the region. It drove Spanish exploration and mapping of Patagonia for centuries, as expedition after expedition pushed further south, lured by the twin magnets of golden cities and legendary giants. While they never found their wandering utopia, these journeys opened up the continent, leading to new cultural contacts, conflicts, and ultimately the colonization of the South. The myth, in its own way, shaped the destiny of a continent. It demonstrates with stunning clarity how a story, born from a mixture of misunderstanding, hope, and fear, can ripple through history, altering the course of exploration and the lives of countless people. The true guardians of Patagonia were not giants, but the stories about them, stories powerful enough to redirect the ambitions of empires and forever mark a land and its people. From the windswept plains of Patagonia, we now voyage to the lush, river-fed heartlands of Southeast Asia, where water is not a scarce resource to be guarded, but the very lifeblood of civilization. Here, in the realms of ancient Paiute and Mon cultures, a different kind of guardian myth flourishes, one that is fluid, powerful, and deeply intertwined with the environment. This is the legend of the lost kingdom of Sagala, a city of immense prosperity and spiritual power, said to be protected by the most revered and fearsome beings in the regional cosmology, the Naga. These are not mere monsters, they are ancient, intelligent serpent deities, masters of the waterways and the treasures that flow from them, embodying a profound philosophy of balance and respect. The Naga holds a uniquely complex position in Southeast Asian folklore. It is a creature of duality, capable of immense benevolence and devastating wrath. In its benevolent form, the Naga is a bestower of rain, a protector of the Dharma, and a guardian of hidden wisdom. It is associated with fertility, the life-giving forces of the rivers, and the subterranean treasures of the earth. Yet, if angered or disrespected, the Naga can transform into a force of terrifying destruction, capable of unleashing floods, causing earthquakes, or striking down those who violate its domain with disease or misfortune. This dual nature makes the Naga the perfect symbolic guardian for a city like Sagala, as it represents the two potential outcomes of human interaction with the natural world, either harmonious prosperity or catastrophic ruin. The mythical Sagala is described in various texts as a radiant kingdom, a center of trade and spiritual learning, whose wealth was derived from its control of vital river trade routes. Its prosperity, however, was not seen as a product of human endeavor alone. The legends insist that the city's fortune was a gift from the Naga, who dwelled in the surrounding waters and the earth beneath. The Nagas were the true owners of the lands, rich as the gems, the gold, and the agricultural abundance that came from the fertile river Silt. The human inhabitants of Sagala could enjoy this wealth only through a sacred pact of mutual respect. They built magnificent temples and shrines to honor their serpentine benefactors, conducted rituals to appease them, and governed their society with an understanding that their actions directly influenced the Naga's mood. The Guardian was not an external threat to be defeated, but a partner in a delicate, ongoing negotiation. This myth finds a powerful echo in the real-world archaeology of Myanmar. The extensive ruins of Sri Khesetra, one of the great city-states of the Paiute people, stand as a likely inspiration for the Sagala legend. This was indeed a prosperous, advanced civilization, with sophisticated irrigation systems, grand brick stupas, and evidence of widespread trade. Critically, Naga iconography is everywhere at Sri Khesetra. They are depicted on terracotta plaques, slithering up the sides of sacred structures, often shown in a hybrid form, part cobra and part dragon, their hoods flared in a display of both protection and power. This was not merely decorative art, it was a public declaration of a core belief system. The city's engineers understood that their complex water management systems, the source of their wealth, required a stable and benevolent natural world. The Naga myths provided the ethical and spiritual framework for managing that relationship, discouraging the over-exploitation of resources and encouraging a communal ethos of sustainability. The true genius of the Naga Guardian narrative is its enduring lesson in environmental stewardship. The stories taught that the river was not a mere resource to be tapped, but a living entity with a consciousness and a will. Polluting it, overfishing it, or diverting its waters without proper ceremony was not just bad engineering. It was a profound spiritual transgression that would invite retribution. This mythos effectively encoded centuries of observational wisdom into a compelling, memorable story. It preserved the understanding that human civilization is inextricably linked to the health of its water systems, and that true prosperity comes from finding a balance between taking and giving back. The lost city of Sagala, guarded by the Naga, is more than a forgotten capital. It is a timeless metaphor for the pact we must all make with the natural world, a reminder that the greatest treasures are protected not by walls but by wisdom and respect. Now we travel to the very edges of the ancient Greek imagination, to a concept so pure and perfect it could only exist beyond the grasp of the ordinary world. This is the myth of Hyperborea, a name that literally means beyond the north wind. Unlike other lost cities shrouded in darkness or guarded by monsters, Hyperborea was a realm of eternal light and bliss, a utopian paradise so ideal that its primary protectors were not beasts, but deities themselves: Apollo, the god of the sun and reason, and Boreas, the personified spirit of the north wind. Their guardianship was not one of violent deterrence, but of serene, impenetrable isolation, creating a perfect society preserved forever in a state of grace, hidden from the corruption and struggles of the mortal realm. The classical descriptions of Hyperborea, found in the works of writers like Herodotus and Pindar, paint a picture of a land untouched by sorrow, age, or strife. The sun shone 24 hours a day, the fields yielded 2 bountiful harvests each year, and its inhabitants, the Hyperboreans, lived for 1,000 years in a state of perfect health and happiness. When they had finally experienced all the joy life could offer, they would simply choose to end their existence by leaping from a cliff into the sea, a peaceful and willing return to the cosmos. This was not a city of gold or material wealth, but a civilization that had perfected the art of living, achieving a harmony with nature and the divine that made gold irrelevant. Its greatest treasure was its flawless existence. The role of the guardians in this myth is fascinatingly abstract. Apollo was said to spend the winter months in Hyperborea, drawn to its rational perfection and artistic splendor. His presence there sanctified the land, making it a place of divine favor. Boreas, the north wind, served as the physical barrier. His icy, tempestuous breath encircled the realm, creating a swirling, impassable vortex of freezing air that kept the unworthy and the merely curious at a safe distance. This dual guardianship represents a profound idea, that a true utopia is protected not just by physical force, but by its very alignment with higher principles of beauty, reason, and natural order. To reach Hyperborea, one would not need a better ship or a stronger sword, but a purer soul and a more enlightened mind, qualities that would somehow allow safe passage through the storm. The likely inspiration for this beautiful fiction came from the Greeks' encounters with northern cultures like the Scythians through trade routes. Travelers would have returned with tales of the midnight sun experienced in Arctic summers, of vast, fertile plains, and of peoples who lived very differently from the Mediterranean world. The Greek mind, always seeking to understand the unknown through the lens of myth and philosophy, transformed these fragments of reality into an idealized elsewhere. The brutal cold of the north became the cleansing breath of Boreas, and the long summer days became the eternal light of Apollo's favor. Hyperborea was less a real place on a map and more a philosophical construct, a thought experiment about what human society could be if it were free from all the constraints of the known world. In modern times, the myth has been adopted and adapted by various groups, from romantic poets seeking an unspoiled earthly paradise to more esoteric theorists who have tried to place it on maps of Greenland or Siberia. These attempts to geographically pin down Hyperborea ultimately misunderstand its purpose. Its true location was always psychological and spiritual. The guardians, Apollo and Boreas, symbolize the internal and external barriers to achieving perfection. Boreas represents the external hardships, the struggles and challenges of the journey that weed out those without conviction. Apollo represents the internal qualifications, the reason, creativity, and harmony one must cultivate to be worthy of entering a state of grace. The myth endures because it speaks to a universal yearning not just for an easier life, but for a perfect one, and acknowledges that such a state is so fragile and rare that it must be protected by the very forces of nature and the divine. It invites us to consider that the greatest lost civilizations we seek might not be made of stone but of ideas, waiting for us not at a longitude and latitude, but at the end of a long journey of personal and collective refinement. While the legend of Hyperborea lived in the rarefied air of classical philosophy, our next story emerges from the turbulent waters of a much more modern imagination, born in an era captivated by both spiritualism and the dawn of global communication. This is the myth of Mu, a supposed lost continent in the vastness of the Pacific Ocean, a tale that swapped the divine guardians of old for a more contemporary kind of sentinel, ancient serpent beings and the echoes of a high technology that met a cataclysmic end. Unlike the gradual folkloric evolution of most guardian myths, the story of Mu was largely the creation of one man, a British writer named James Churchward, who in the 1920s and 30s claimed to have deciphered ancient tablets revealing the history of this sunken world. His narrative, a blend of misunderstood science and outright invention, tapped directly into a growing public fascination with alternative histories and the secrets that might lie beneath the world's greatest ocean. Churchward described Mu as the original cradle of civilization, a massive continent that once stretched from north of Hawaii to the Fiji Islands and Easter Island. It was, in his telling, an idyllic paradise inhabited by 64 million people, the Nokkels, who possessed a sophisticated understanding of energy, medicine, and spirituality far surpassing our own. This was not a primitive culture but an advanced one, a kind of Pacific Atlantis that had achieved a golden age. Its downfall, however, was as dramatic as its rise. Churchward claimed that massive underground gas chambers ruptured, causing the entire continent to shudder, fracture, and sink beneath the waves in a single, terrible day of volcanic fury and earthquakes, leaving only the scattered peaks of its highest mountains, what we now know as the islands of the Pacific, as lonely tombstones. But such a place, with its profound secrets and advanced knowledge, could not be left utterly unguarded. Churchward's mythos wove in the idea of serpentine guardians, entities that were both the cause and the consequence of the catastrophe. In some interpretations, the serpents were the ancient Nokkels themselves, who had evolved or transformed into a new state of being to survive the cataclysm, now dwelling in subterranean caverns or underwater cities, protecting the ruins of their former home from the unworthy. In other versions, the serpents are literal colossal beings, the symbolic owners of the Earth's deep forces, who both destroyed the continent for its inhabitants' hubris and now stand watch over its sunken marvels. These guardians served the same purpose as the dragons of old. They protected a treasure, in this case not gold, but potentially world-altering knowledge and technology, from falling into the wrong hands. The choice of the serpent as the guardian is deeply significant and draws on a wellspring of ancient symbolism. Across countless cultures, from the Mesoamerican feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl to the Naga of Southeast Asia, the serpent represents cycles of death and rebirth, primordial wisdom, and a deep, chthonic connection to the Earth's most powerful and destructive forces. By making serpents the guardians of Mu, Churchward was connecting his modern invention to these ancient archetypes, lending it a sense of timeless legitimacy and deep, mystical weight. The serpent embodies the dual nature of the Pacific itself, a life-giving source of sustenance and a terrifyingly destructive force of tsunamis and typhoons, both a mother and a monster. Despite its popularity in certain circles, the myth of Mu is entirely devoid of scientific support. Geologists universally agree that there is no evidence for a recently sunken continent in the Pacific. The islands are not mountain peaks of a drowned landmass. They are the result of volcanic hotspots and tectonic plate movement, forming over millions of years. Furthermore, the incredible navigational feats of the Polynesian people who settled this vast ocean realm are a testament to their own sophisticated culture and seafaring technology, not the inherited legacy of a lost super civilization. The real history of the Pacific is far more impressive and human than any fictional continent, telling a story of intentional, courageous exploration across thousands of miles of open ocean. And this is where the true value of the Mu myth lies. It is a powerful example of how modern myths are born, not from ancient oral traditions, but from books, media, and the human desire to find simple, sensational answers to complex historical questions. It shows how older symbolic creatures like serpents can be repurposed and updated to guard new kinds of treasures, lost technology, instead of lost gold, reflecting the anxieties and fascinations of the 20th century. The enduring appeal of Mu speaks to our longing for a hidden chapter in the human story, a forgotten golden age that promises to explain our origins and perhaps even hold the key to our future. The serpent guardians of Mu, therefore, are not protecting a physical place, but the very idea of a forgotten past, standing as metaphors for the immense, unknown depths of both the ocean and our own collective imagination, reminding us that some of the most compelling lost cities are the ones we build not with stone but with stories. Deep within the emerald labyrinth of the Peruvian Amazon, where the Andes Mountains surrender to the endless sea of trees, lies a legend that represents the last, unbroken breath of the Inca Empire. This is the story of Petiti, the final refuge, a city where the Inca people and their sacred treasures were said to have vanished to escape the relentless advance of the Spanish conquistadors. But this sanctuary was not left unguarded. Its protector is one of the most potent and revered beings in the entire Amerindian cosmos, the Jaguar, a creature whose spirit is believed to be a shape-shifting shaman, a guardian that judges the heart of every soul who seeks the lost city. This myth is not merely a tale of hidden gold. It is a profound narrative of resistance, resilience, and the spiritual defense of a culture pushed to the brink of extinction. The historical context gives this legend its powerful emotional weight. In the 1530s, the Spanish, led by Francisco Pizarro, captured the Inca Emperor Atahualpa and systematically dismantled the largest empire in the pre-Columbian Americas. While the conquistadors seized immense quantities of gold and silver, they could never quite capture the entire spirit of the civilization they sought to conquer. Stories persisted that a faction of the Inca nobility, along with the most sacred religious artifacts including the golden sun disk and the puma-shaped altar of the Coricancha temple, had undertaken a desperate exodus. They fled east over the treacherous peaks of the Andes and into the unknown green hell of the Amazon basin, a place the Spanish feared and avoided. There, they were said to have established a new, hidden capital, a city they called Petiti, where the old ways could be preserved in secret, far from the reach of the cross and the sword. To protect this last bastion, the stories speak of a guardian that is both magnificent and terrifying. The Jaguar holds a place of supreme power in Amazonian spirituality. It is the undisputed lord of the rainforest, a master of both the land and the water, a symbol of unchecked power, stealth, and mystical knowledge. In shamanic traditions, the jaguar is not just an animal, it is a spirit being, and the most powerful shamans are those who can navigate the spirit world by taking on the jaguar's form or essence. As the guardian of Petiti, this jaguar spirit is believed to possess a divine sense of judgment. It is said to curse those who approach the city with greed and violence, causing them to become hopelessly lost, to fall prey to disease, or to simply vanish without a trace. Conversely, it is believed to guide and bless those rare individuals who seek the city with pure intentions, perhaps an anthropologist showing deep respect, or a descendant of the Inca seeking to reconnect with a stolen heritage. The guardian, therefore, is not a mindless beast but a moral arbiter, a defender of cultural integrity. This myth has proven to be one of the most effective and enduring forms of cultural preservation. For centuries, it has acted as a protective shield woven from story and belief, It deterred Spanish looters who were deeply superstitious and feared the pagan magic of the jungle. Later, it filtered modern explorers, discouraging those only interested in plunder and attracting those who understood the deeper historical significance. The story itself became a vessel carrying the memory of Inca resistance across generations, ensuring that even if the physical city remained hidden, the idea of it, a place of unconquered indigenous sovereignty, would never die. The Jaguar spirit became the keeper of this flame, its myth ensuring that the world would remember that the Inca story did not end with the Spanish conquest, but simply retreated into the shadows, waiting for a time when it could be remembered with honor. In recent decades, the legend has been fueled by tantalizing archaeological discoveries that suggest there is more than just myth to the story. In 2001, the Italian archaeologist Mario Poglia discovered a report from a 17th-century missionary in the Vatican archives, describing a large city rich in gold, silver, and idols, located in the middle of the tropical jungle near Peru. Then, in 2006, a joint Peruvian-British team, following these clues and using satellite imagery, identified a large, geometric-shaped structure on a remote mountainside in the Megantoni National Sanctuary. The site, known as Pyramide de Panteocola, appears to be a massive terraced hill resembling other Inca structures. While it is not a gleaming city of gold, its existence in such an inaccessible location suggests that the Amazon was indeed a place of refuge and perhaps even settlement for the Inca, validating the core historical truth behind the Petiti legend. The enduring power of Petiti and its jaguar guardian lies in its potent symbolism. The jaguar is more than a guardian. It is the embodiment of the untamable Amazon itself, fierce, beautiful, and impenetrable to those who do not understand it. It represents the spirit of resistance that refused to be colonized. The myth tells us that some treasures are not meant to be found and placed in a museum. Their power lies in their hiddenness, in the hope and mystery they inspire. Petiti is not a lost city waiting to be looted. It is a lasting monument to cultural survival, a testament to the idea that a people's spirit can never be fully extinguished as long as their stories are told. The jaguar does not just guard gold, it guards the very memory of a free and proud people, ensuring that their final retreat remains a sanctuary forever. Yet the story of Yuba did not simply vanish into the desert winds. It clung to the oral traditions of the Bedouin people, a persistent whisper of a lost greatness and a stark warning. In Omani folklore, the tale evolved with a distinct and powerful emphasis on its supernatural guardians. Here, the city was not merely abandoned, it was actively protected by the Djinn, powerful beings made of smokeless fire who serve as enforcers of a divine moral order. These were not mindless monsters, but intelligent entities deeply offended by human arrogance and greed. The legends describe how the Djinn would punish any traveler who sought the city's wealth for selfish gain, conjuring mirages to lead them astray, summoning sandstorms to bury their camps, or driving them mad with thirst in the endless dunes. The ruin of Yuba itself was their ultimate lesson, a demonstration that no civilization, no matter how wealthy or powerful, is immune to collapse when it turns its back on righteousness and respect. This version of the myth transforms the city from a mere archaeological target into a permanent moral landmark, a site where the very landscape is imbued with an ethical charge, guarded by invisible sentinels who judge the intention in a person's heart. This enduring legend, passed down for generations around desert campfires, is what ultimately provided the crucial clue that led to Yuba's potential rediscovery. The key was not in a dusty manuscript, but in the living memory of the Bedouin who still spoke of the place they called Al-Hazna, associating it with the lost city. In the 1980s, a team led by explorer Nicholas Clapp and archaeologist Joris Zarens took these oral traditions seriously. They understood that the myth was a cultural map, and they used it to guide a revolutionary tool, satellite imagery. By analyzing photographs from NASA, a space shuttle, and other satellites, they scanned the deserts of Oman for ancient caravan routes, the invisible paths that frankincense traders would have followed for centuries. Just as the folklore suggested, these faint tracks, visible only from space, converged like spokes on a wheel at a single, remote point in the desert known to the local tribes as Shisa. The myth had literally drawn a circle on a map, guiding technology to its doorstep. What the excavations at Shisa revealed was a discovery as dramatic as the legend itself. They uncovered the remains of a large octagonal fortress with 8 tall towers, built around the edge of a massive limestone sinkhole. It appeared the city had quite literally been swallowed by the earth, its foundations collapsing into a cavern beneath the desert floor. This was a catastrophic end that perfectly mirrored the Quranic description of Iram's destruction. Artifacts found at the site confirmed its identity as a major frankincense trading hub, active for over 1,000 years before its sudden collapse. The discovery was a stunning validation of the interplay between myth and history. The stories of Djinn and divine punishment had preserved the memory of a real place and a real disaster for millennia, acting as a cultural compass that pointed directly to the truth. The Guardians had, in a way, finally allowed the worthy, those who listened to the local stories with respect, to find what they sought. The Djinn of Yuba, therefore, represent one of the most sophisticated functions of a Guardian myth. They are not merely protectors of a physical location but enforcers of a timeless ethical code. Their story is a profound warning against the exploitation of both cultural and natural resources. Yuba's wealth was built on the frankincense trade, and its collapse serves as an ancient allegory for the dangers of unsustainable growth and hubris. The Djinn punish those who would plunder the past without understanding its context, or who would strip the land of its riches without showing reverence. In this sense, the myth is shockingly modern, speaking directly to contemporary dilemmas about cultural appropriation, archaeological ethics, and environmental responsibility. The legend insists that exploration is not a neutral act. It is a journey that must be undertaken with humility, for the desert and history itself has guardians that will hold us accountable for our intentions. From the sun-scorched deserts guarded by Djinn, we travel now to the misty, mystical heart of Russia, to a place where water, faith, and national identity merge into one of the most poignant guardian legends of all. Nestled in the Volga region, Lake Svetloya is a body of water so still and perfectly oval that it looks less like a lake and more like a great, dark eye staring up from the forest floor. It is here local tradition insists that the sacred city of Kitezh lies preserved in its depths, a spiritual fortress protected not by a beast, but by the divine will of God himself, its visibility a test of a person's very soul. The legend is a powerful tale of faith in the face of overwhelming force. As the story goes, the devout Prince Yuri Vsevolodovich built 2 cities in the 12th century, Mali Kitezh, which exists to this day as the town of Krasny Kholm, and the greater, secret spiritual capital, Bolshoi Kitezh, hidden deep in the forests near the lake. When the Mongol horde under Batu Khan swept across Russia, they easily captured Mali Kitezh and forced a captured soldier to reveal the path to the greater city. The Mongol army followed the path to the shores of Lake Svetloya, expecting a battle. Instead, they witnessed a miracle. As the citizens of Kitezh knelt in fervent prayer, not for victory but for salvation, God heard their plea. Fountains of water began to erupt from the ground, engulfing the city before the invaders' eyes. The golden domes of the churches were the last to disappear beneath the rising waves, leaving the Mongols staring in stunned silence at a placid lake where a metropolis had just stood. Kitezh did not fall. It was sanctified, withdrawn from the world of violence and conquest to become an eternal sanctuary. The guardians of Kitej are therefore unlike any we have encountered. They are not mythical creatures but divine and natural forces acting in concert. The primary protector is the lake itself, which serves as a shimmering, impenetrable veil. But the legend speaks of other phenomena that guard the site and signal its holiness. On quiet, clear nights, particularly around religious holidays, those with pure hearts and ears to hear are said to detect the faint, beautiful sound of bells tolling from the depths. Others speak of seeing the ghostly glow of church candles reflected on the water's surface, or even the outlines of the white stone buildings and crosses shimmering just beneath the waves. These experiences are not meant for everyone. They are gifts bestowed only upon the righteous, the humble, and the true believers. The guardianship is a form of divine discernment, separating the pure of heart from the merely curious or cynical. This myth is a fascinating tapestry, woven from both Orthodox Christian and older pagan threads. The story of a city saved by prayer and divine intervention is a classic Christian motif, reflecting a deep faith in God as the ultimate protector of his people. Yet, the method of its salvation being absorbed by a body of water resonates with much older, pre-Christian Slavic beliefs. In the pagan worldview, lakes, rivers, and forests were alive with spirits, and water was a potent boundary between the world of the living and the world of the ancestors or the gods. Kitej's legend masterfully blends these two worldviews, creating a uniquely Russian spiritual narrative where God uses the ancient, animistic power of the land itself to perform his miracle. This synthesis created a story of resilience that could resonate across all levels of society, from the peasant who revered the spirit of the lake to the priest who preached the power of God. Even in our modern scientific age, Lake Svetloyar has not given up all its secrets, lending a tantalizing layer of plausibility to the ancient tales. Geological studies suggest the lake is of karst origin, meaning it was formed by the collapse of an underground cavern, an event that could indeed have been sudden and catastrophic. Sonar surveys of the lakebed have revealed anomalous underwater terraces that some researchers interpret as the remnants of human-made structures. Perhaps most intriguing are the acoustic studies that have recorded unusual, low-frequency sounds emanating from the deep, sounds that could scientifically explain the legendary bell tones reported by witnesses. These findings do not prove the existence of a sunken city, but they do provide a physical basis for the stories, suggesting that a real, dramatic geological event may have been interpreted through a spiritual lens, transforming a natural disaster into a divine miracle. Ultimately, the enduring power of Kitej lies in its profound symbolism. For centuries, through Mongol rule, Tsarist oppression, and Soviet atheism, the legend persisted as a story of invisible defiance. The city became a national metaphor for the indomitable Russian spirit, a belief that the true heart of the nation, its faith, its culture, its identity, could be persecuted and driven underground but could never be truly destroyed. It was always there, hidden just out of sight, waiting for a time when it could re-emerge. The guardians of the lake, therefore, protect more than a city, they protect hope itself. They represent the idea that truth and beauty can never be fully eradicated by force, that they simply retreat to a sacred, protected space, invisible to the eyes of tyrants but visible to those who have maintained their purity and faith. Kitej is a promise that what is most valuable is often hidden, not lost, awaiting the right moment or the right state of being to reveal itself once more. Rising from the highlands of southern Africa, the magnificent stone ruins of Great Zimbabwe stand as a silent testament to a powerful and sophisticated empire that once dominated the region. This is not a city lost to myth, but a place where history and legend are intricately woven into the very fabric of its stone walls, protected by guardians not of stone and mortar, but of spirit and symbol. The most iconic of these sentinels are the Zimbabwe birds, elegant soapstone sculptures that once stood atop monoliths throughout the city, their fierce gaze turned outward across the kingdom. To the Shona people, the builders of this great city, these were not mere decorations. They were sacred vessels, believed to be the physical embodiment of ancestral spirits or messenger birds connected to the supreme god Mweri. They were the divine guardians of the king, the nation, and the land itself, ensuring prosperity and raining down misfortune upon those who would bring harm or disrespect to this sacred place. This profound spiritual belief created a powerful cultural shield long before European colonizers ever set foot on the continent. The local communities understood the site's significance and the power of its protectors, which helped preserve the ruins from extensive looting or desecration for centuries. However, when European explorers and settlers first encountered these breathtaking ruins in the late 19th century, they were confronted with a reality that shattered their racist preconceptions of Africa as a continent without history. Unable to conceive that an indigenous African civilization could have engineered such an advanced complex of stonework, they concocted a series of fantastical and frankly absurd alternative origins. They claimed Great Zimbabwe must have been the work of the Phoenicians, King Solomon's mines, or even the Queen of Sheba, anyone but the ancestors of the local African people. This was more than just academic error. It was a deliberate act of narrative theft, an attempt to sever the connection between a people and their history to justify colonial domination. In this fierce battle over history's ownership, the guardian myths of the Shona people became an unexpected but potent weapon of resistance. While colonial authorities were busy publishing theories about Ophir and Sabia, the local communities kept alive the oral traditions that had been passed down for generations. They spoke of the spiritual birds, of the sacred nature of the site, and of the direct lineage between the ruins and their own cultural identity. These stories, whispered around village fires and taught to children, were acts of quiet defiance. They preserved a truth that the colonial narrative sought to erase. The very fact that the site was feared and respected due to these guardian spirits meant that its story was kept alive within the community, creating an unbroken thread of memory that outside forces could not completely sever. The myths ensured that history was not just written in books by foreigners, but lived and breathed in the stories of the people to whom it truly belonged. The discovery of several of the Zimbabwe bird carvings by archaeologists, though some were tragically looted, provided a powerful symbolic focus for this cultural reclamation. These artifacts became national treasures, and the bird itself was eventually emblazoned on the Zimbabwean flag after the nation won its independence in 1980. This was a definitive act of decolonization, taking a symbol that had been spiritually guarding the land for centuries and placing it at the very center of the modern national identity. The bird guardian transformed from a spiritual concept into a political and cultural icon, representing the resilience of a people and their triumphant reclaiming of their own narrative from the hands of those who had tried to steal it. The story of Great Zimbabwe and its avian protectors offers a masterclass in how guardian myths function in the real world. They are not just fanciful tales for entertainment. They are active, living systems for preserving cultural memory and identity. The spirit birds did not need physical wings to protect the city. They protected it through the power of story, fostering a deep-seated reverence that discouraged disrespect and fortified a community's claim to its own heritage against external denial. They symbolize the unbreakable connection between a people, their land, and the spirit of their ancestors, proving that the most enduring guardianship is not achieved with walls, but with words, beliefs, and the unwavering conviction that your history is your own to tell. But these ancient stories of hidden cities and their supernatural protectors did not remain locked away in old books or local folklore. they found a powerful new life in the 20th and 21st centuries, reborn through the most influential storytelling mediums of our time: cinema, literature, and video games. This migration from campfire tales to blockbuster screens represents a fascinating evolution where age-old guardian myths are refashioned for a global audience, shaping how modern society perceives these lost worlds and the creatures that defend them. Think of the thrilling opening of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where Indiana Jones navigates a booby-trapped temple to replace a golden idol with a bag of sand. While not a direct lift from a specific myth, this scene perfectly captures the modern reinterpretation of ancient guardianship. The traps, the rolling boulder, the poisoned darts, the collapsing floors are a technological and mechanical version of a mythical beast. They serve the same purpose: to test the worth, skill, and respect of the intruder, punishing the greedy and rewarding the clever and the virtuous. This shift from a living, breathing dragon to an ingenious, inanimate puzzle reflects a contemporary worldview that values intellect and perseverance over brute force, translating the ancient concept of a guardian into a challenge that can be solved with a sharp mind and a steady hand. Video games have taken this interactive reinterpretation to its logical extreme, transforming the seeker from a passive viewer into an active participant. In the wildly popular Uncharted series, protagonist Nathan Drake doesn't just hear about the curse guarding El Dorado. He physically battles the mutated, armored descendants of its Spanish conquistador protectors. The legendary Tomb Raider franchise frequently pits Lara Croft against supernatural entities risen from the myths of the culture she is exploring, from the immortal Queen Himiko in Japan to the powerful god king of Kaitesh. These digital experiences allow players to feel the adrenaline rush of confronting these legendary guardians firsthand, making the ancient stories visceral and immediate. However, this gamification often comes with a simplification. The complex cultural and spiritual significance of a guardian spirit is frequently reduced to a health bar and a set of attack patterns to be memorized and overcome. The nuanced moral lessons about greed and respect can get lost in the sheer fun of the combat, turning a profound mythological being into a final boss fight. This process of adaptation is a double-edged sword. On one hand, popular culture runs the risk of exoticizing and oversimplifying these rich narratives. A deeply sacred story from an indigenous culture can be stripped of its context and repackaged as a spooky plot device for mass consumption, a practice that verges on cultural appropriation. The Guardians become set dressing, their original meaning diluted for the sake of entertainment. Yet, to focus only on this downside is to miss the tremendous upside. These films, books, and games act as a powerful engine of cultural transmission. A teenager playing a game might first encounter the name Petiti or the concept of a Jaguar spirit not in a history textbook, but in a thrilling digital adventure. That spark of curiosity can ignite a desire to learn more, to Google the real myths behind the game, effectively funneling a new generation toward a deeper appreciation of world cultures and ancient history. Popular culture doesn't just keep these myths alive, it gives them a massive global megaphone. The evolution of these guardian myths in our collective storytelling reveals a profound truth about their function. They are not static relics but dynamic, living concepts that continually adapt to reflect the values and anxieties of the society retelling them. The medieval dragon guarding a hoard of gold spoke to fears of greed and the dangers of hoarding wealth. The biomechanical traps in a sci-fi version of Atlantis might reflect modern anxieties about technology outpacing human control. The enduring presence of these stories, in whatever form they take, confirms their fundamental power. They tap into a universal human fascination with the unknown, the desire to believe that there are still wonders hidden in the world, waiting for someone brave, clever, or pure enough to find them. As these tales bridge the gap between past and present, they challenge us to consider not just what we are looking for, but why we are looking and what we might become on the journey. What is it about these tales of hidden cities and their fantastic protectors that resonate so deeply within us, echoing across centuries and cultures with undiminished power? The answer lies not in the maps we draw, but in the intricate landscapes of the human mind itself. We are, at our core, a species wired for curiosity, forever driven to look over the next horizon, to solve the next puzzle, to uncover what has been deliberately concealed. These myths of lost civilizations offer the ultimate puzzle box, a promise that there are still grand secrets waiting to be found, a direct challenge to the modern notion that our world has been fully charted and explained. This innate curiosity is a primal engine, pushing explorers into uncharted jungles and compelling audiences to click on videos and turn pages, all fueled by the tantalizing possibility that a fundamental truth about our past or even our purpose remains just out of sight, guarded by something extraordinary. This drive is profoundly amplified by our complex relationship with the unknown. Fear and fascination are two sides of the same coin, and guardian myths masterfully leverage both. The unknown can be terrifying: a dark forest, a deep ocean trench, an empty desert representing all that is beyond our control and understanding. By populating these blank spaces on our mental maps with a dragon, a jaguar spirit, or a djinn, we give that abstract fear a face and a form. It becomes something that can be understood, outsmarted, or even befriended, transforming paralyzing dread into a manageable challenge. The guardian monster is, in a psychological sense, a coping mechanism, a narrative tool that allows us to engage with our deepest anxieties about mortality, chaos, and the limits of our own power, all within the safe container of a story. Furthermore, these narratives tap into some of the most fundamental archetypes identified by psychologists like Carl Jung, universal patterns that exist in our collective unconscious. The quest for a myth-guarded city is a pure expression of the hero's journey. The seeker answers a call to adventure, crosses a threshold into a special world filled with trials, and faces the ultimate test, overcoming the threshold guardian. This guardian is not merely an obstacle to be destroyed, it is a crucial test of the hero's worthiness. Defeating a dragon requires more than strength. It demands courage, cleverness, and often purity of heart. This archetypal struggle provides a powerful framework for personal growth, reflecting our own internal battles against fear, greed, and doubt. We aren't just watching Indiana Jones or reading about Percy Fawcett. We are subconsciously projecting our own journey onto them, using their story as a metaphor for overcoming the challenges in our own lives. On a societal level, these stories function as vast cultural cauldrons for processing complex emotions and transmitting core values. In an era of rapid change, environmental crisis, or social upheaval, tales of a city that fell due to its own hubris offer a compelling explanation for chaos. They provide a sense of order and moral clarity, asserting that actions have consequences, whether it's the greed that drowned wise or the arrogance that obliterated Iram. They teach lessons about humility in the face of nature's power, respect for cultures different from our own, and the dangers of unchecked ambition. By listening to these stories, we collectively grappled with the big questions of right and wrong, of what makes a civilization truly great or ultimately doomed, finding comfort and guidance in their timeless, if sometimes tragic, outcomes. Ultimately, the unwavering appeal of the myth-guarded city is that it serves as a perfect mirror. It reflects our highest aspirations, our longing for a utopia like Shambhala, a place of perfect peace and wisdom. Simultaneously, it reflects our deepest fears of being lost, of being punished for our transgressions, of being deemed unworthy. These legends endure because they are not really about finding a place, they are about finding ourselves. They ask us who we are and who we want to be when faced with the unknown. Are we the greedy conquistador destined to be cursed by the monkey god? Or are we the respectful seeker who approaches with humility and is rewarded not with gold but with understanding? The guardian at the gate is and has always been a reflection of our own intentions, making these ancient stories a perpetual and powerful lens through which we examine the human condition. For centuries, the search for myth-guarded cities was a pursuit fueled by rumor, romantic speculation, and often a blatant disregard for the cultures that created the stories in the first place. Today, that quest has been revolutionized by a suite of technologies that act as a kind of X-ray vision for the past, allowing archaeologists to peel back the layers of the earth and the layers of the legend without ever lifting a shovel. At the forefront of this quiet revolution is LiDAR, or light detection and ranging. This technology works by firing millions of laser pulses from an aircraft down through dense forest canopies. By measuring how long each pulse takes to bounce back, it creates an incredibly detailed, three-dimensional map of the ground surface, digitally stripping away the vegetation that has hidden civilizations for a millennium. It was LiDAR that revealed the true scale of the lost civilization in the Mosquisha jungle, not as a single white city, but as a sprawling network of settlements, transforming Percy Fawcett's dream of Z from a lone metropolis into a forgotten world. Similarly, in the jungles of Cambodia, LiDAR scans of the Angkor Wat complex uncovered vast, low-density urban areas and sophisticated water management systems that had been completely invisible to ground surveys, revealing a scale of engineering that feels almost mythical in its own right. But the technological toolbox extends far beyond lasers. Ground-penetrating radar can map buried foundations and walls beneath city streets or open fields, revealing the outlines of ancient settlements without a single excavation. Satellite imagery, analyzed with powerful algorithms, can identify subtle discolorations in soil or crop growth that signal the presence of long-buried ruins, a technique that helped pinpoint the potential location of the lost city of Yuba in the Arabian desert. Even DNA analysis is now being brought to bear on these mysteries, not to find cities themselves, but to trace the movement of the people who built them. By analyzing ancient genetic material, scientists can track massive migrations and cultural exchanges that may have inspired legends of powerful, far-flung kingdoms, adding a biological layer to our understanding of how these stories might have spread and evolved across continents. This scientific precision inevitably leads to a process of myth debunking, but it's a debunking that is far more fascinating than simple negation. The goal of modern archaeology is not to prove that our ancestors were foolish or superstitious, but to understand the logical and often very real circumstances that gave birth to their extraordinary tales. Take the legend of the Mapinguari, the terrifying guardian beast of the Amazon. For decades, it was dismissed as pure fantasy, but paleontologists now know that the region was once home to giant ground sloths, immense creatures that stood over 3 meters tall. The descriptions of the Mapinguari, its massive size, its terrible claws, its supposed immunity to arrows, are a near-perfect match for folk memories of these extinct giants, passed down through thousands of years of oral tradition. The myth wasn't a lie, it was a form of ancient natural history, a way of encoding the memory of a very real and very terrifying creature that once shared the rainforest with humans. This approach reveals a crucial truth: the guardian creatures of legend are rarely pure inventions. More often, they are powerful symbols representing very real barriers. A dragon guarding a mountain pass might be a personification of the deadly avalanches and rockfalls that regularly close that route. The water spirit that drowns greedy seekers of a desert city is a perfect metaphor for the life-threatening mirages and the absolute scarcity of water that protected a remote oasis. The Djinn that punish those who disrespect a ruin are a narrative encapsulation of the very real diseases, shifting sands, and hostile conditions that have killed countless unprepared explorers. The myths served as a risk assessment and a survival guide, packaging critical environmental knowledge into a memorable and terrifying story that would ensure the lesson was never forgotten. The guardians were not monsters but teachers. This new, nuanced understanding places modern archaeologists in a delicate position. They must walk a tightrope between scientific rigor and deep cultural sensitivity. To a Western scientist, a story about a monkey god is a fascinating cultural artifact to be studied. To the indigenous people who live near the site, that story is a living, breathing article of faith, a sacred prohibition that has actively protected their heritage for centuries. The most ethical researchers now understand that their job is not to burst into a sacred grove with LiDAR units and drones to prove there's no curse. Instead, it is to collaborate with local communities, to listen to their stories not as obstacles to be overcome, but as valuable data sets and ethical guides in their own right. The myth of the curse becomes a partner in preservation, a cultural injunction that has done a better job of protecting a site from looters than any chain-link fence ever could. The ultimate revelation of this scientific and cultural detective work is that the divide between myth and history is a false one. They are not opposing forces but intertwined strands of the same human story. Archaeology does not kill the myth, it liberates the truth within it. We may never find a continent called Mu or a literal, shining Atlantis, but we can now see how such stories grew from the shared human experience of catastrophic events like the volcanic eruption that devastated the Minoan civilization on Thera, an event so apocalyptic it surely echoed across the Mediterranean for centuries. By separating the historical kernel from the legendary embellishment, we don't diminish the past, we enrich it. We come to understand that the greatest treasure these lost cities offer is not gold or jewels, but insight into the human mind itself, our fears, our hopes, and our timeless need to weave a compelling story from the fragile threads of memory and the imposing ruins of the past. The true guardian of these places was never a monster. It was the story, faithfully passed down through generations, that kept their memory alive long enough for us to finally come looking. As we stand at the intersection of a rapidly changing planet and unprecedented technological advancement, the very nature of myth and discovery is poised for a transformation as dramatic as any we have yet seen. Climate change, often framed as a slow-moving apocalypse, is also becoming a reluctant archaeologist, its relentless forces gradually revealing what centuries of legend have only whispered about. Rising global temperatures are melting permafrost and glaciers at an accelerated pace, unlocking landscapes that have been frozen in time for millennia. In the high Andes, retreating ice is exposing well-preserved artifacts and even entire settlements from pre-Columbian cultures. Organic materials that would have rotted away anywhere else now emerging from the ice in a state of perfect preservation. Similarly, severe droughts are lowering water levels in reservoirs and lakes around the world, revealing the ghostly outlines of towns and villages that were deliberately flooded decades ago to create them. These are not the mythical cities of gold, but they are very real lost settlements, and their sudden reappearance feels like a message from the past, a tangible, haunting echo that the public is quick to weave into new narratives. As these phenomena become more common, we can expect a new wave of stories to emerge, not about cities hidden by divine will, but about places reclaimed by an angry earth, their re-emergence seen as a warning or an omen for our current age. Simultaneously, the opposite is occurring in coastal regions, where rising sea levels are actively consuming history. The very process that created the legend of Wise and Lionus is happening in real time along our shorelines. As villages and archaeological sites are gradually submerged, they are being reborn as modern myths. The stories told by displaced communities will inevitably evolve, perhaps speaking of the spirits of those who refuse to leave or of new guardians like the ghosts of drowned ecosystems that now patrol the waters above their homes, protecting them from the developers and dredgers who might disturb their rest. This creates a powerful duality, climate change as both a revealer and a concealer of secrets, a force that gives with one hand while taking away with the other. The guardian myths of the future will likely reflect this complex relationship, portraying nature not as a static backdrop to be conquered, but as a dynamic, sentient, and often vengeful participant in the human story. The old tales of cities punished for their hubris will find terrifying new relevance, reframed not as divine retribution from an angry god, but as a direct consequence of our own collective actions, a planetary-scale lesson in cause and effect. Technology, our other great shaping force, is revolutionizing the quest itself, fundamentally altering how we search for and interact with these legendary places. The era of the lone explorer hacking through the jungle with a machete is giving way to the age of the digital cartographer. Archaeologists now routinely use satellite imagery and LiDAR, a laser-based radar system that can see through dense forest canopies, to map entire lost cities from the comfort of a laboratory. These tools are demystifying the world at an incredible rate, systematically filling in the blank spaces on the map where myths traditionally thrive. One might think this would spell the end for guardian legends, but the opposite is proving true. Instead of killing mystery, technology is simply shifting its domain. The discovery process is becoming more abstract, the seeker separated from the sought by layers of data and algorithms. This creates a new kind of distance, a new veil of incomprehension, which is the very soil in which myth grows. The guardian, therefore, must evolve. We can no longer be deterred by a physical beast, so the mythos adapts. Perhaps the new guardian is a corrupted data stream, a glitch in the satellite feed that hides the city from prying eyes. Or maybe it's an AI, a digital sentinel programmed by some ancient, unknown civilization to protect its secrets within the very networks we use to find them. The most profound evolution, however, may come from how we experience these stories. Digital storytelling and augmented reality are poised to create immersive, interactive mythologies that we can literally step into. Imagine visiting a real-world archaeological site, pointing your phone at a crumbling wall, and seeing a holographic projection of the city in its prime, complete with a shimmering, augmented reality guardian spirit that narrates its history and explains its cultural significance. This technology could breathe new life into ancient tales, transforming them from static stories into living, breathing experiences. But it also raises fascinating ethical questions. Who gets to decide how these digital guardians look and behave? A video game developer in another country could create a sensationalized, monstrous version of a culture's sacred protector, while the descendants of that culture might use the same technology to present a more nuanced, respectful interpretation. The battle over narrative ownership, once fought with oral tradition, will now be waged in the realm of code and digital animation. The guardians of the future may exist in 1,000 different forms across 1,000 different apps, each version reflecting the values and intentions of its creator. This forward-looking perspective ultimately reveals that these myths are not dusty relics to be shelved and forgotten, but vibrant, living traditions that are continuously adapting to our collective consciousness. The core themes remain constant: the warning against greed, the respect for nature, the test of character, but the packaging is always changing to meet the anxieties of the present. In an era defined by climate crisis, it is no surprise that the emerging guardian narratives increasingly emphasize sustainability, interconnectedness, and global responsibility. The mythical beast is no longer just guarding a hoard of gold. It is guarding the last pristine ecosystem, the final source of clean water, the secret to a sustainable way of life that we have foolishly forgotten. These new stories reframe the quest not as a search for treasure to be looted, but for wisdom to be reclaimed. They challenge us to prove our worth not by slaying a dragon, but by demonstrating that we have finally learned to live in balance with the world around us, that we are ready to receive the knowledge that our ancestors preserved for us in story. The enduring legacy of these myths is their incredible flexibility, their timeless ability to hold up a mirror to humanity and ask us who we are, and more importantly, who we aspire to become. Throughout this incredible journey, we've ventured from the deepest jungles to the highest mountain peaks, from sunken coastlines to scorching deserts, all in pursuit of one of humanity's most enduring fascinations, the forgotten cities guarded by myth. What we've discovered is far more valuable than any lost treasure. These stories are not just fanciful tales, they are the very soul of history itself, a profound intersection of collective memory, cultural identity, and boundless imagination. They show us that when a physical city falls, its essence doesn't simply vanish. Instead, it undergoes a transformation, evolving from a place of stone and mortar into a story of spirit and meaning, protected by a legendary guardian that ensures its memory will never truly die. These guardian creatures, in all their magnificent forms, are so much more than simple obstacles or monsters. The dragon coiled around a hoard of gold, the jaguar spirit judging the hearts of seekers, the snow lion embodying fearless purity. Each one is a key that unlocks a deeper understanding of the culture that created it. They are mirrors reflecting our deepest values and our greatest fears. They teach us that the journey is just as important as the destination, and that the true prize is often not material wealth, but wisdom, respect, and a humbling connection to those who came before us. They remind us that some doors are not meant to be broken down, but opened with the right key of intention and reverence. As our technology grows more advanced, allowing us to peer through forest canopies and scan desert sands from space, we might be tempted to believe that the age of mystery is over. But the opposite is true. Each new discovery, whether it's a LiDAR map revealing a lost Amazonian civilization or a satellite identifying ancient caravan routes, doesn't diminish the myth, it enriches it. It proves that these stories were never mere fiction. They were born from a kernel of truth, a memory of a real place, a real event, or a very real danger, meticulously wrapped in a narrative that could survive the relentless passage of time. The myths were the original keepers of history, and now science is finally allowing us to listen to what they've been trying to tell us all along. So what is the ultimate lesson these myth-guarded cities hold for us today? It is a call to approach our world and our past with a sense of wonder and humility, to understand that every culture has its own way of seeing the world, its own system of preserving what is most precious, and its own right to tell its own story. The next time you hear a legend about a city lost to time, try not to ask, "Is it real?" Instead, ask, "What does this story mean? What is it trying to protect? And what can it teach me about the people who have kept it alive?" These are the questions that lead to true discovery. Thank you for embarking on this extraordinary expedition through time and tale. We've only scratched the surface of history's greatest mysteries. Now we want to hear from you. Which of these myth-guarded cities captured your imagination the most? Is it the watery legend of Wise, the spiritual sanctuary of Shambhala, or the enigmatic ruins of Nan Madol? Share your favorite in the comments below. We love reading your thoughts and insights. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more adventures. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an exploration. Until next time, keep wondering, keep seeking, and never stop listening for the whispers of the past.